The iPhone 17e is the perfect example of Apple doing the absolute minimum and somehow still expecting applause. And people might actually fall for it again, because on paper, this thing looks like a new phone. Until you realize Apple is basically recycling old parts, tweaking a frame, and calling it innovation. Let's start with the biggest joke of all, the display. Apple is bragging about giving the 17th slimmer bezels, but don't get too excited. The actual panel is the same old iPhone 14 era OLED they slapped into the 16th. According to a leak, BOE is making most of the panels again, with Samsung and LG filling in the gaps. Apple didn't upgrade the display tech, they just squeezed it tighter into the frame. And then comes the rumor war. Some leakers swear Apple is adding the dynamic island to the 17th, but the elec doesn't even hint at it. Why? Because it makes zero sense. Apple would have to redo the entire TrueDepth layout, redesign the sensors, and ditch half the production efficiencies they desperately want to reuse. None of that fits Apple's ultra-cheap E strategy. So let's be real, slimmer bezels are believable. Dynamic Island is probably wishful thinking, and if Apple keeps the notch again, it'll be a hilarious contrast to their premium models, which will look like the future while the 17e looks stuck in 2022. Even the redesigned chassis, which is supposedly more compact, feels like Apple's way of distracting you from how little is actually new. Look! It feels mini again. Yeah, because shrinking the body costs nothing compared to upgrading the display or camera system. Speaking of cameras, Apple is reportedly throwing in the new 18-megapixel center stage selfie camera, which is actually impressive. Maybe too impressive. It's almost funny. The front camera gets a huge upgrade while the back stays a basic 48-megapixel shooter. And yes, the phone might get the A19 chip, which sounds amazing. Until you remember Apple puts powerful chips in every device, even when everything else around it screams, budget. Fast silicon won't magically hide the corners they're cutting everywhere else, but the real slap in the face, 60 Hz. In 2026, Apple refuses to move this phone past 60 Hz because BOE can't produce LTPO panels, and Apple won't spend money on better parts. Meanwhile, $150 Android phones give people 90 Hz and 120 Hz without breaking a sweat.